I punched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles split open. It was stupid, I know. But the sound, that awful sound of my hand cracking against the leather, felt better than thinking about what just happened. You're not enough. You never were. I could still hear her voice, flat and sharp, slicing through me clean. I had spent 3 years with her, believing maybe I could fix myself by being loved enough. Believing maybe I was finally more than a guy with a broken childhood stitched together by sarcasm and workaholism. I was wrong. Again. The blood from my hand smeared the gear shift when I threw the car into drive. I didn't care. I just wanted to be moving. Away from her driveway. Away from the way she hadn't even cried when she said goodbye. Away from the look that said I was a project she gave up on. There was a gas station down the road, so I pulled in more out of habit than need. I sat there, idling, blood drying on my hand, throat tight, couldn't even cry. Not because I didn't want to. It was like my body forgot how. That's when it hit me, the thought, the one you don't say out loud. Maybe it's better if I just disappear. I stared at the pump numbers blinking zeros, the sky leaking winter rain, and thought, there's nothing left to fix. People say your life flashes before your eyes when you're close to death. I think it's more like this slow, grinding slide memory by memory of all the tiny ways you let yourself rot. Every time you said yes when you should have said no. Every time you swallowed your anger, your hurt, because you were taught it was weak. Every lie you told yourself about being okay. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel and tried to breathe. Came out in these shallow, jerky gasps. I was 32 years old. I had a decent job, a decent apartment, friends who sent memes but didn't ask real questions. I had all the things they said would make you happy, and I wanted to vanish. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I ignored it, probably a spam text, or one of those stupid wellness apps I signed up for when I was trying to be better. I sat there so long the rain turned to sleet. I thought about my dad, about the time he told me, "You're too sensitive. You gotta toughen up or the world will eat you alive." I was 10. I believed him, and I started putting on the armor that day. The jokes, the fake smiles, the I'm fine shrug. Now here I was, fully armored, alone, bleeding in a gas station parking lot. A knock at the window startled me. I jerked up, heart slamming against my ribs. It was some old guy in a flannel jacket, white beard, gas pump in hand. He pointed to my tire, flat as a pancake. Of course the universe would kick me when I was down. I nodded thanks, got out, and started digging for the spare. It was frozen into the trunk well, rusted and useless. I swore under my breath. The old guy watched for a second, then shuffled back to his truck. A minute later he came back with a small compressor. "Here," he said. "It ain't much, but it'll get you to a shop." I blinked at him, too raw to even pretend to smile. "Thanks," I muttered. As he worked, he said like it was nothing. "Bad night." Huh. I almost laughed. Instead, I shrugged, the universal sign for don't ask. But he did. "Wanna tell me about it?" Something inside me cracked. I don't know why I sat down on the cold curb and told a stranger that my girlfriend dumped me, that my dad never hugged me, that sometimes I wanted to drive off a bridge just to make the noise stop. He just listened. Didn't tell me to man up. Didn't tell me to be grateful. Just listened, nodding now and then, the way a human being should when another human being is drowning. When I finished, the tire was half filled and he handed me the compressor. "You gotta take it from here, kid," he said. Not unkind, just honest. "I don't know if I can," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He shrugged. "You don't have to know. You just gotta try." And just like that, he got in his truck and drove away, leaving me there, compressor in hand, cold rain soaking through my jeans, realizing maybe that was the whole point. Nobody saves you. You save yourself. One shitty, painful inch at a time. I didn't drive home that night. I sat there with the half-inflated tire until the gas station lights flickered out, and the night grew thick and empty around me. Every part of me screamed to go, back to my apartment, back to my bed, back to pretending. But something kept me stuck. Maybe it was the old man's words. Maybe it was that I was too damn tired to keep pretending. I pulled out my phone. still buzzing with notifications. Group chat jokes, work emails, a missed call from my mom. I stared at it until the screen went black. Couldn't call her. I didn't know how to explain this ache that wasn't about the breakup or the tire or even her. It was about me. About the fact that somewhere along the line I got lost. I shoved the phone back in the seat and leaned back, letting the cold seep into my bones. And for the first time in years, I didn't fight it. I let the sadness crawl all over me. I didn't slap a joke over it. I didn't suck it up. I sat with it. Felt like dying. Felt like maybe living. Somewhere between then and dawn, I decided something. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. Not for a woman. Not for friends. Not for my parents. If I was broken, I was broken. If I was hurting, I was hurting. If that made me weak, so be it. I drove to a tire shop as soon as they opened. The kid behind the counter barely looked at me as he rang up the patch job. Maybe he thought I was just another guy with a flat tire. I wanted to tell him, no man, you don't get it. I'm a guy who finally admitted he's not okay. But I didn't. Baby steps. After they fixed the tire, I sat in the parking lot again. I should have gone to work. I should have clocked in, answered emails, acted like a functional adult. But instead, I Googled therapists in my area. The idea made my skin crawl. Where I grew up, therapy was for rich people who didn't have real problems. Real men drank beer and watched sports and shoved their feelings into the dark corners of their stomachs. But what if real men also got help when they needed it? I found one with good reviews. Called the number before I could chicken out. Some lady picked up and scheduled me for next Thursday. She asked why I was coming in. My mouth went dry. I almost said, I'm fine, just a little stressed. Instead, I said, I think I'm falling apart. There was a long pause. Then she said, okay, we'll figure it out together. I hung up and just sat there, heart racing like I jumped out of a plane. That was the first real thing I did for myself in a long, long time. I wish I could say the next few days were this cinematic montage of healing and badass transformation. They weren't. I went to work. I answered emails. I watched TV. I ate frozen pizza. I didn't tell anyone about the breakup, or the tire, or the old man, or the phone call. I didn't know how to yet. I was still too raw. But something had shifted. I stopped pretending. When my friend asked if I wanted to grab beers, I said, not tonight, man. I'm not doing great. He didn't know what to say. Neither did I. But it felt better than lying. I stopped laughing at jokes that weren't funny just to fit in. I stopped telling myself it didn't hurt when it did. I started paying attention to the way my chest tightened when people joked about weakness, or when my mom said, you're always so strong. I wasn't strong. I was scared. But maybe scared wasn't a bad place to start. The night before my first therapy appointment, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. I thought about canceling. I thought about running. I thought about drowning the fear in whiskey and sleeping till noon. Instead, I got up, pulled out an old notebook from a drawer, wrote one sentence. I want to know who I am without the armor. It scared the hell out of me. It also made me feel more alive than I had in years. I almost turned around twice on the way there. The therapy office was this bland little building crammed between a coffee shop and a dentist. I sat in the parking lot 15 minutes past my appointment time, hands sweating, heart jackhammering, every excuse in my brain firing at once. This is stupid. You're fine. You're wasting everyone's time. You're not like those people who really need this. But something, maybe that tiny, exhausted part of me that still wanted to live, made me get out of the car. I pushed the door open. Bell chimed. Fake plants. Soothing music. A woman behind the desk smiled at me like I wasn't a total failure. You must be Jacob, she said. I hadn't heard my name in so long without a joke attached that it almost made me cry. Yeah, I croaked. She handed me a clipboard. Take your time. I checked all the boxes. Anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, trouble trusting people. Pretty much the whole damn checklist. By the time the therapist called my name, I was half ready to bolt. But I followed him back anyway. Small room, couch, chairs, a box of tissues like some kind of cliché. He was younger than I expected. Maybe mid-30s, jeans and a button-up, sneakers. He didn't look like a guru or a guy who was gonna fix my life. He just looked like some dude. "Hey, Jacob," he said. "I'm Mark. I'm glad you're here." I didn't know how to answer that, so I just nodded. We sat. Silence stretched. He didn't rush it. Finally he said, "Tell me what made you come in today." My mouth opened, then closed. It was like trying to shove a river through a pinhole. Everything wanted to come out. The breakup, the fight with my dad when I was 17, the nights lying awake hating myself. But I didn't know where to start. "I guess I can't do it anymore," I said. My voice cracked. I hated how weak it sounded. Mark nodded. "Do what?" I swallowed. "Pretend I'm okay." And then it started. The words, the anger, the grief, the panic, all of it pouring out in fits and gasps, messy and half-formed. I talked about my dad, how he never hit me but somehow made me feel smaller than a bug under his boot. How I learned early that showing sadness was a death sentence in my house. How I spent most of my life trying to be impressive enough, funny enough, successful enough to finally earn love. And how none of it worked. Mark listened. Really listened. Not the way people usually listen, half distracted, already thinking about what they're gonna say next. He listened like every word mattered. Like I mattered. At some point, I said, "I feel broken." And he said, "Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're hurt." That landed like a punch in the gut. Broken meant defective, unfixable. Hurt meant wounded, something you could heal. It was such a small shift in language, but it cracked something wide open in me. Maybe I wasn't doomed. Maybe I wasn't weak. Maybe I was just a guy carrying too much pain alone for too long. I left that session feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Drained, raw, but also weirdly lighter. Like I had been carrying a backpack full of bricks and finally set it down for a second. I didn't have any big revelations that first day. No magical fixes. No soaring music moment where I realized everything was going to be okay. But I made another decision. I was going to come back. No matter how hard it got. No matter how many old wounds it ripped open. No matter how much my brain screamed at me to run. I owed it to myself, the kid I used to be, the man I was trying to become, to stay. That night, I pulled out the notebook again and wrote, "Maybe healing isn't becoming someone new. Maybe it's remembering who you were before the world broke you." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it might be true. It didn't get easier. Every session with Mark was like peeling my own skin off with a dull knife. We dug into things I'd buried so deep I forgot they were there. Not just the obvious stuff, the breakup, my dad, but the tiny cuts too. The moments nobody else would even remember. Like when I won the spelling bee in 4th grade and my dad said, "Big deal. See if you can win something that matters." Or the time I cried when our dog died and he snapped, "Suck it up. It's just a dog." Or every birthday he forgot. Every game he missed. Every time he showed up but wasn't really there. I told Mark about it all. Some days I left feeling hollow. Some days I left furious. And once, I left feeling this weird, fragile hope I didn't know what to do with. One Thursday, a few weeks in, Mark asked me something that stopped me cold. "What do you think you learned about yourself growing up?" I stared at him, blindsided. "I don't know," I muttered. He waited. I picked at the cuff of my jacket, heart thudding. Finally, I whispered, "I guess I learned that I'm not worth much unless I'm useful." The words tasted like blood in my mouth. Mark nodded like he already knew. That's a heavy thing to carry into adulthood. And suddenly it clicked. Why every relationship felt like a performance. Why I couldn't let people see me tired, or scared, or needy. I thought I had to earn love. I thought if I wasn't funny enough, smart enough, tough enough, people would leave. Just like he did. I clenched my fists in my lap, trying to keep it together. Mark saw. He said, "It's okay to be angry, Jacob." I shook my head hard. "No, I don't want to be like him." "You're not like him. Feeling anger isn't the same as becoming cruelty." I didn't believe him. Not really. I was terrified of my own anger. Terrified it would make me into the man who made me flinch without ever lifting a hand. But later, in my car, when I thought about all the times I stuffed down the rage, all the times I smiled when I wanted to scream, all the nights I drank just enough to numb the knot in my chest, I realized Mark was right. The anger wasn't evil. It was human. It was mine. I went home and, for the first time, let myself feel it. I punched a pillow until my arms ached. I screamed into my mattress. I cried so hard I thought I might break apart. And when it was over, something strange happened. I felt a little less like a ghost. I felt a little more like myself. Not the version of me that smiled on command. Not the version that took care of everyone else's feelings at the expense of my own. The real me, the angry, messy, hurting, healing me. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, sweaty and snot-nosed and exhausted, and wrote in my notebook, I have a right to my anger. I have a right to take up space. I have a right to exist, even when I'm not perfect. It wasn't a Hollywood moment. No triumphant music. No dramatic speeches. It was just me breathing, surviving, daring to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was allowed to be whole. Even if it was ugly. Even if it was slow. Even if nobody ever clapped for it. Especially then. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was the quiet that came after. I didn't realize how much noise I carried around inside me until I let some of it out. And then I was just there. In the silence. No armor. No fake smiles. No distractions. Just me. It was terrifying. Mark said that after you stop performing for everyone else, you have to learn how to show up for yourself. I hated that. I didn't even know what it meant. The idea of trusting myself felt like handing the keys of a burning car to a drunk driver. But he kept pushing me to try. Start small, he said. What's one thing you need today? I didn't know how to answer that at first. I was so used to scanning the room for what other people needed. What my boss wanted. What my girlfriend wanted. What my parents wanted. What I wanted didn't even register. One night, sitting in my crappy apartment, I forced myself to ask it out loud, what do you need, man? The answer was embarrassing. I needed rest. Real rest. Not scrolling on my phone. Not zoning out in front of Netflix. Rest. So I turned off the TV. Plugged my phone in across the room. Got into bed before midnight. No noise. No distractions. Just me in the dark. At first, it felt like lying in a minefield. Every old thought exploded in my face. You're lazy. You're pathetic. You don't deserve peace. But I stayed there anyway, gritting my teeth through it. I stayed. And somehow I woke up the next morning feeling not good exactly, but less hollow. More present. That was the first small trust. More followed. I started saying no to things that drained me, invitations I didn't want, favors I couldn't handle. I stopped answering every text immediately. I let myself be a bad friend sometimes, a bad son, a bad employee, because being good had damn near killed me. It felt like learning to walk again after a lifetime of crawling. Of course, not everybody liked the new version of me. My mom called one night, voice tight. You've been so distant lately, she said. You never used to be like this. I swallowed hard. I'm working on some stuff, I said. You're not depressed, are you? She demanded, half worried, half accusing. I'm trying not to be, I said quietly. She didn't know what to do with that. She changed the subject to the weather. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. But it also made something clear. I couldn't expect everyone to understand this version of me. Some people loved the version of me that made things easy. That smiled and nodded and said everything's fine. That guy was dying. And I wasn't going to resuscitate him. There were losses. Some friendships faded. Some conversations dried up. Some connections I thought were solid turned out to be scaffolding for a version of me that didn't exist anymore. But there were wins too. Quiet ones. Small ones. Like the friend who noticed I wasn't laughing at cruel jokes anymore and stopped telling them. Like the coworker who started opening up after I admitted I was struggling. Like the barista who said, you look tired, and instead of lying, I said, yeah, I am, and she just smiled and gave me an extra shot of espresso. Little things. Human things. For the first time, I was building trust not on who I pretended to be, but who I really was. Flawed. Messy. Honest. It wasn't perfect. Some nights I still fought the urge to crawl back into the old armor. Some days I still wondered if I was screwing everything up. But every time I chose myself, even in the smallest, clumsiest way, I laid down another brick in a life I actually wanted to live. In my notebook that night, I wrote, the people who truly love you will love the real you. The others were just renting the mask. And somehow for once, that didn't feel like bitterness. It felt like freedom. It was a Sunday when the call came. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. but something told me to pick up. Jacob, the voice said. Rough. Faintly familiar. It's your dad. My stomach dropped. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 2 years. Not after the last blow-up when I finally told him I wasn't coming home for Christmas and he said, figures. You always were a disappointment. I thought I was done. I thought I was free. But hearing his voice dragged me right back into that old, dark place where I was 10 years old again, desperate for a crumb of approval. I'm in the hospital, he said. Heart attack. There was a long pause. Like he was waiting for me to fall apart to rush to his side. I didn't. What do you want me to do with that information? I asked, my voice flatter than I meant. Another pause. Then quieter, I don't know. I just thought you should know. I could have hung up. Part of me wanted to. But another part, the part one was still learning how to listen to, said, no. Face this. So I said, okay. I hung up. Sat there staring at the wall for a long time. Then I grabbed my jacket and drove. The hospital was one of those cheap, sterile places on the edge of town. Fluorescent lights. Beige walls. The smell of bleach and something sour underneath. They led me to his room. He looked smaller than I remembered. Phrylia. Tubes in his nose. Machines beeping around him. He looked up when I walked in. For a second, something almost like hope flickered across his face. Hey, he said. I stood there, arms crossed, pulse hammering in my ears. He started talking about the heart attack, about how the nurse was rude, about how he was sick of the food. Small talk. Bullshit. I let him talk. Let him fill the room with noise. I didn't owe him anything, but I owed myself the truth. I had to know. When he finally ran out of steam, I said, why did you call me? He blinked, caught off guard. You're my son. That's never mattered before. He flinched just a little. Good, I thought savagely. Good. Feel it. But then I sighed. Exhausted. I'm not here to play pretend, Dad. He looked down at the sheet, picking at a loose thread. For a long time he didn't say anything. Finally he said I wasn't good at it. At what? At being a father. The words hit me sideways. Not because they fixed anything. They didn't. Nothing could erase the years of absence, the coldness, the damage. But for once he wasn't denying it. He wasn't gaslighting me or blaming me or pretending it was all in my head. He was just admitting it. I sat down in the hard plastic chair by the bed, still tense, still ready to bolt. I used to think it was my fault, I said quietly. That if I'd been better, you would have loved me, right? His face crumpled just a little. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. I know now it wasn't me, I said. It was you. Your pain. Your fear. Your choices. He closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his weathered cheek. I'd never seen him cry before. Not once. It didn't undo anything. It didn't heal me. But it mattered. I stayed for 15 minutes. I didn't hold his hand. I didn't tell him I forgave him. I didn't give him a Hollywood ending. But when I left, I didn't feel the usual heavy chain of guilt dragging behind me. I felt free. In my car, I opened my notebook and wrote. Breaking the cycle doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like telling the truth and walking away. I started the engine. Drove home. Not because I was running anymore, but because I finally knew where home was. And it wasn't with him. It was inside me. Some endings aren't fireworks. Some are just a quiet, steady exhale after holding your breath for years. The weeks after the hospital visit felt strange. Lighter, but also lonelier. Like when you take off armor you've worn so long it's fused to your skin, there's relief, but also an ache where it used to be. I kept going to therapy. I kept writing in the notebook. I didn't chase people who didn't check in. I didn't beg anyone to understand the version of me they never really met. Some nights were still hard. Some mornings I still woke up with the old panic clawing at my chest. But the difference was now I knew how to stay with myself through it. I didn't run. I didn't drown it. I didn't hate myself for feeling it. I just let it be. One Saturday morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the way the early light hit the frost on the grass. I felt this deep, humming kind of sadness. Not the despair I used to feel. Not the weight that made me want to disappear. Just a sadness that said, you're here. You're real. You're alive. I realized something then. Meeting yourself isn't one big moment. It's not a movie scene or a thunderclap of revelation. It's 1,000 tiny choices. It's saying no when you want to people please. It's going to bed when your brain says you should work harder. It's answering honestly when someone asks how you're doing. It's making friends with the parts of you you used to shove in the dark, the anger, the fear, the softness, the need. It's forgiving yourself on the days you slip back into old patterns because you will. You're human. It's realizing healing isn't about becoming someone different. It's about remembering the person you were before the world told you who you had to be. I'm not healed. I don't think I ever will be. But I'm honest now. With myself. With others. I don't armor up just to make people comfortable. I don't bleed myself dry just to feel needed. I live. Messily. Imperfectly. Bravely. And some days that feels like enough. Some days it even feels like a miracle. Last week, Mark asked me to bring something to our session, something that represented my journey so far. I thought about it. Hard. In the end, I didn't bring a trophy. I didn't bring some cheesy inspirational quote. I brought my old notebook. The first page, still crinkled, still messy, where I had scrawled. I want to know who I am without the armor. Mark smiled when he saw it. Looks like you're finding out. I smiled back. Not because everything was perfect, but because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of who I was meeting.